Vatanen is now second, and although the Escort design may be 15 years old, it's not showing its age.
Hello everyone, you're listening to Rally DNA for what will be the penultimate episode of Season 2. I'm Cillian Cronin, and by my side as ever is the Anglo half of this Anglo-Irish partnership, Jamie Arkle. Jamie, how are you doing today?
Fantastic. Thanks, mate. Thank you very much. How about yourself?
Very good. Looking forward to our guest today, I think. And today's guest is someone I fear will have maybe so many stories for us. We'll have to do a season all for him, a man responsible for some iconic Ford rally cars, amongst other things, and who worked with some true greats of the sport, Mr. Raymond Sherratt. Ray, welcome along to Rally DNA. Thanks very much for coming on.
Good evening to you. Good evening to both of you. It's nice to be asked to come onto the show and share what I've got up here. You know, it's such a wonderful sport that really is being ruined in today's standards, you know, compared to as I know it. I mean, I don't know your ages, but, you know, certainly going back to when I first started in 67, having prepared a vehicle for the 67 RAC for Skip Brown at AVS in Liverpool, and of course the event was cancelled. We were at the workshop ready to go down in the morning, and we got a phone call, and unfortunately it was cancelled. And then unfortunately I was told by Skip that his father was going down the M1 the day previous to see him off at the start, and unfortunately he crashed the car and killed. So, you know, yeah.
Not a fairly inauspicious start, it must be said.
Absolutely, yeah.
So, would it be fair to say that you sort of cut your rallying teeth with Skip Brown?
Oh, most definitely, yeah. I mean, I finished my time late 20. I was about 20 and 3 or 4 months, and I'd had enough of serving my time. Friend of mine who just lived up the road from me was working in Liverpool, and he said, there's a great company in Liverpool that's doing rallying. And then it just started from there. You know, I applied, spoke to Skip, and God, we got on like a house on fire, you know. I taught him how to weld.
That's a claim to fame.
And was that your first introduction to rallying, Ray, or had it been something that you'd been on the fringes of before that, or was it more of it was a career-led decision?
I'd been doing various things in the garage where I served my time. Paul, who was the boss's son, he had a 1070 Cooper S, you know. He had a HRG that he used to do a little bit of sort of, you know, road rally type things in it, you know. I'd been interested, obviously, in motorsport for a long time, well before that, you know, racing go-karts back in the early days, you know. I had a good friend called Tony Anziani, and his father used to work for the Ferrari team back in the 30s, you know, when they first sort of started, you know, at Alfa, and then it went obviously to Ferrari and that, you know. And he was a great person to talk to about engineering side of motor cars, you know.
You must have picked up a fair few skills when serving your time. It's not every apprentice comes out at 20 years old and that knows how to weld now, coming out of a regular workshop.
Yeah, you know that. I used to get all what they used to call the horrible jobs, but I used to love them because at the age of 18, I was dropping Mark II, Mark 1, Mark II Jaguar engine and gearboxes out, suspension out, engine and gearbox out to replace a clutch, rather than doing it the old-fashioned way, was using the tin opener and opening up the floor to get the box out. You know, I used to love the jobs, you know. I mean, going back, oh Christ, making my own mountain bikes, the age of 12 and 13, going up to the garage where I served my time. And going down to the tip, which was about a mile away, and choosing the various components off bicycles to make them, you know, modifying the front upright to the steering so as I could have springs top and bottom to make the thing with suspension. it goes back a long way, you know. Even up to, God's truth, I suppose the age of 7 and 8, taking a skate and hammering down or making the top of it flat so as you could put a piece of board across it. And I didn't stand on it. I used to sit on it. That's why I've got knuckles that look like this, you know.
I bet your parents loved you at that age.
Well, I mean, something my wife always reminds me of is your mother always used to say she never knew when our Raymond went out, she never knew what he'd come back in like, you know. Well, I mean, I had a superb childhood, you know. We didn't have a large amount of money, but God's truth, I enjoyed myself, you know. I didn't mind climbing trees and jumping out of them and all sorts in the undergrowth, you know, just as kids were playing, you know.
And
good learning curves, you know.
Mm-hmm.
And what sort of cars was Skip running that time in '67 then that you were preparing for him?
When we first went there, he had an X, and I think it was either Timo Mäkinen or Pat Moss, Healy 3000. It was
Heelys, wow.
the full lightweight aluminium hitch, you know, disc brakes all round, 4-speed box with overdrive on all the gears. It was an absolute beast. It was a superb car, even just to take up Smithdown Road and go and do a bit of testing in it. You know, it was a superb car, you know. Mm-hmm. He got that from the factory, and he also got, I think it was the first time that they sort of closed competitions down. Obviously, they were running minis and things at the time, but they closed the Healy side of it down, and there were so many bits and pieces around, you know, crankshafts that were made at Rolls-Royce. They go on about the 12-port aluminium cylinder heads now. Well, he had about 4 or 5 of them in stock, you know, and all of that went in a big skip later on and to a company in America, you know, in I shouldn't say a skip, in a container, you know. But no, I mean, he did that. Then we went on to the old Mini Cooper S. We ran that. He used to do an awful lot of road rallying with it. I remember one time I had a phone off Alan that used to work with us. Mine, I think 2 or 3 doors up the road from me, because at home at the time we didn't have a phone. And Alan come round. He said, we've got to go in and take the van up. And we went up to where the M6 was being extended, up over Shap, and Skip had been out in the Cooper S on a night event, and he'd come over and brow into I think it was a T-junction, and you could either go left or right, but unfortunately Skip went straight on into the wall, you know, and we had to go out and sort him out. And I say it was just where the motorway was being built at the time, you know. We managed to find a chap there sat with his brazier, you know, a cocky watchman. He was there, and, oh, come in, lads, you know, get a warm and that, you know. And then in the morning, we towed the car back home, back to Liverpool, you know. But after that, I think we ran imps. We ran an early. What would it be in those days? It would be a group 1 imp, I suppose. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. With the Scottish and a few other events with it, and then we did the full group 6. And at the time at AVS, with us using the imp and that, we'd got into groups competition department, and apart from obviously taking parts or getting parts from them, we were producing the Group 6 cylinder heads at the time. They were supplying us with the burr casting, and then we were machining all the porting and that, setting up the valves and things, seats and that, and then doing the wheels ring conversion on it, you know, cutting the groove for the wheels ring conversions. And then it went on to Avengers, and it went from there. We did the various events. We did the Scottish in the Avenger. I think that would have been about 71, I think, something like that. That's why I've still got 2 or 3 scars down the back of my neck. Because he come off one stage, run along Loch Lomond, and he said the steering's gone. What had happened? The 2 brackets on the cross member that hold the rack on had broken off. And, oh Christ, what the hell are we going to do now? You know. So at the time, the good old army lads were out, of course, in the Land Rovers, you know, and they had, at the first time I'd ever seen one, was the little oxyacetylene porta packs, you know. And he said, come on, he said, you can borrow that, you know. So we got the guard off it, and I got underneath it, and I got Skip to hold the rack in position, and I started getting a decent big puddle, and I got quite a few good wells on it, and I got another puddle going on the near side, and then all of a sudden the puddle dropped, and it went straight down the back of my neck. And I sort of wiggled my backside a bit, and it literally dropped out the back of my pants, you know. And then finished off the well, got all that sorted off, and of course, guard back on, and Skip went. And Dell, who was obviously Skip's girlfriend at the time, she took a load of water and poured the water down the back of my neck, you know, to cool it off, you know. Great times, you know, great times, you know.
What were the guys at Roots like to work with from a rallying point of view? Were they fairly into supporting rallying endeavours?
They were, yeah. I mean, there was, oh Christ, we're going back now, trying to remember names. There was a chap there that used to build the imp gearboxes, and I think it was Brian. I don't know whether it was Brian Wildman, because I've got a name there, but I'm sure his name was Brian. And basically, we were running a competition between ourselves to who could get an imp gearbox to last the longest without seizing on the bushes. I think I got the one that Skip did the Group 6 Scottish in. I got it to, it might have been the RAC that he did it in. Anyway, I got it to finish, and then he turned around, Brian turned around and said, how the hell did you get it to finish? He said, every time I've tried to get one. I said, well, give it more clearance, you know. Let's face it, that the box is designed to do something maybe between 50 and 100,000 miles before it needs to come down, you know. Take it that the box is only going to do a couple of 1,000 miles, so increase the tolerances, get a bit more oil around it, you know, give it a chance. And that seemed to be it. And I used to set them up in the lathe and just take about a thou off the bush, and then give a little bit of taping and that, and put a bit of pattern on it. And it seemed to work, you know. But other than that, I suppose, oh God, I'd have to go a few years later on when they were really using the Avenger with Colin Malkin, you know. I did after I'd left Skip, I did an event with Keith Billows in Cyprus, and that led me back to the old Roots days, you know. As far as Skip goes, I think it was 73 when he turned around and said, well, I think I'm going to have to go bankrupt, you know, and that's when it basically finished as far as AVS was concerned, you know.
Did Skip have a rally named in his honor late in the 80s? Am I recalling that? Was there a Skip Brown rally at some point? Do I remember that correctly?
Oh, there certainly was. I mean, Skip, once Skip had finished AVS, I'd gone off to work for Keith Billows at Hatton Heath, just outside Chester, you know, on the A41. And Skip rented a farm. It was an old cheese farm at Fadderley outside in Cheshire, you know. And that's when, just down the road on the A49, was where Skip Brown got the garage, and it was called Skip Brown Cars, you know. And then, of course, there was various events that Skip sponsored using the Sunbeam and things, He seemed to stick more with the route side of it rather than go into the Ford side of things or something else,
So how about your association with Jeff Fielding, who I gather it was a key part of your career there?
I mean,
if I'm not jumping ahead too far, of course.
Pardon?
If I'm not jumping ahead too far.
I think you're jumping quite a way ahead, actually, because after I worked for Skip, as I say, I went for the job with Keith Billows, and we did events in Belgium. Keith got sponsorship from Manchester Liners Flying Fish, which was a container company. Containers were loaded in Manchester, which they're not now, and shipped to Canada. Then they went from Canada via the Flying Fish part of things, which was across the country to the east, it'd be the west coast, wouldn't it? We did Rally of the Ridley Lakes with Keith, and also the Press and Regardless. Rally of the Ridley Lakes in '74, I think it was. We got a 4th overall in the World Rally Championship, and that was probably the best private event that I'd ever done, and got a result on,
Deeply impressive stuff.
Unfortunately, on the Press and Regardless, he put it off into a sand pit and couldn't get out, so,
Was that in an Avenger?
No, that was an Escort.
Escort, right.
Ford Escort, yeah, twin cam back in the day. I got banned from driving. So I'd done jobs in various garages not far from me here,
What did you make of the Mark 1 Escort when you first got your hands on it?
Mark 1 was a super little car, simple, absolutely simple. You couldn't get much more simple than a Mark 1 Escort. To the point that Toyota basically copied it with the Corolla, and all the other things they did. But before Jeff came along the scene, I was banned from driving at the time, and I worked for a chap up the road from me, and he was friends with a chap called Mk2 and also the managing director of Vernon's football pools. And the two of them got together and decided to buy the ex-Dry Martini powerboat, the F1 offshore powerboat. Chap I worked for, he said, how'd you fancy looking after this for them, Well, that led off to rebuilding engines down at Nicholson McLaren, which was the same year, 76, that Hunt won the World Championship, I was building engines in the same workshop as they were building the DFVs and dynoing them, and that. Did the European Championship with it. Then we went to South America, and that was 6 weeks over in South America, doing 3 races over there, from the Argentine up through Uruguay and into Brazil, There's so many tales from that place, Jesus.
I'd say that was a wild ride.
Well, I mean, the boat was the race boat was put on a trailer at Middlesbrough to go over, obviously, to South America, and it was late getting there. We were in contact with the shipping company, and they said, well, it's going to be late, so you're not going to get it for the first race. So where's it going to go to? Because rather than going down to the capital of the Argentine, which I can't remember at the moment, it would go into into Uruguay, and dock there, and then it would be unloaded and brought to the Argentine, you see. So we said, well, can we not pick it up in Uruguay, you see, because the boat takes so damn long to go from Uruguay to the Argentine, although it's only across the River Plate. I don't know what they're doing, you know, but we said, well, what we'll do, we'll fly over and wait for the boat to dock. So we waited for the boat to dock, and we literally dragged the tractor unit, which was down in one of the decks, you know, in one of the holes. We dragged that out by the back wheels, having cut all the tie bars and things off it, got the boat and the trailer on the dock, and we drove then to a ferry that took us across the River Plate, you know. We got across the River Plate, did that event, and then going back the other direction to go back to Uruguay to do an event. The trailer was decking out on the run-up into the boat. And the captain said, I can't let you on because I can't move it, and I've got to get off to do it. I said to John, who was driving at the time, I said, take no notice of that. I said, just back off a bit and drive up and get the trailer stuck. So when the tide goes out, we can get on. And that's what we did. We got the boat stopped because it couldn't move. We couldn't move. So when the boat, obviously when the tide went out, the boat went down and we drove on. They weren't really late. No, I mean, they weren't really late. All they had to do was put a couple more coals on the fire and you get a bit more speed, you know.
Would these have been big 5-litre V8 power boats, I assume?
Oh, no, 454 cubic inch, which I think is about 7.5 litre.
Big block stuff.
Two of them, two big blocks, yeah. 600 horsepower apiece, you know. And I tell you, testing those, there's three of you obviously in the boat, you know. You've got the navigator who is actually doing the throttling. Then you've got the pilot who's driving, and then you've got like a riding mechanic, you know. Well, at 70 mile an hour, when the driver who was Mk2 who put most of the money into it, he said, I think I can hear a misfire. I said, I can't hear a misfire, you know. He said, well, go and have a listen to him. And you had to sort of crouch down, and towards the back where you were standing, there was a round wooden structure that you could roll out the way and you could go into the engine room. And these two doing sort of 6,000 RPM, you know. I said, there's no misfire. I said, just carry on, Ken, you know, come on, you know. And no, I mean, that was real good learning, because I learned an awful lot with fuel injection on that. It was Lucas fuel injection, which was modified by Kinsler in America for, what would it be? It's Mercury, TK for Aero Marine, you know. And I used an awful lot of that knowledge when I built the Escorts for MCD, you know. And then, of course, that would bring us up to about 77 when I started working for Jeff, you know. I mean, I'd known Jeff for quite a few years before that. I'd known him at AVS, you know. I'd built 1420 or 1430 Cooper S lumps for his hill climb. Cooper S, you know, Jeff did an awful lot of hill climb work, you know. And then, of course, he at the time, I was still banned at the time, you know. Strangely enough, in the powerboat side of things, we'd done Cow's Torquay powerboat race, which is the race around the Isle of Man, you know. And one of the boats was late coming across the line, and he'd hit the wake of all the other boats that they'd gone through. The boat went up in the air, it threw the three people out of the boat, and the boat carried on in a big, big circle. It went round in a circle, and eventually it came ashore. Fortunately, the tide was in. It came ashore, hitting the rocks just outside the main yacht club, you know.
Talk about entrance.
Well, yeah, I mean, aluminium hull boat, this was, you know, because the aluminium hull is used also for the petrol tank. And there was fuel everywhere. The police were going mad. I walked up and I said, well, if you want, I can get the trailer and tractor unit out, and you can arrange a crane and we can lift it up. And okay, I said, but the problem is, I said, I'm banned from driving. I said, I've been driving all around Europe and South America, but I'm banned in this country from driving. Oh, okay, he said. So they got in touch with the chief constable off the Isle of Wight, and he come down. Said, yeah. I said, I'm banned from. He said, you're not banned from driving here. He said, come with me. So we both went down to the yacht club, and he jumped in the passenger seat, and I drove the unit and rescued the boat and got it back. And about 2 or 3 weeks later, I got a nice letter off him, saying thank you very much for helping us, and so.
He didn't try and speed up your return to driving after that. He didn't put a letter in your favor somewhere else, no.
No. But then again, that's when Jeff come along. He pulled up one night outside. He contacted and he said, "Do you fancy building a rally car for me or looking after a rally car?" And that was the first blue and white rally car that he'd bought. He'd actually gone and bought it, and then came and asked me if I'd want to look after it for him. And I said, "Well, I'm sorry, Jeff." I said, "I'm banned from driving." And Jeff, his business was in Liverpool, not far from the docks, the mainland, which was obviously a car delivery company. Jeff was about, 3 miles down the M62 out of Liverpool. And he said, but it's no problem. He said, I'll come and pick you up. So when I'd finished work at about 5:30, I'd have me tea. He'd arrive about 6 o'clock. He'd pick me up because he'd come from Liverpool through the tunnel. He'd pick me up, take me back through the tunnel, down the motorway, drop me at his house. It was sort of an L-shaped double garage that he had, and I'd look after the cars there. And that went on until probably about late 78, early 79, when he bought a 2,000 square foot new unit at Widnes, which was basically underneath the main road over the bridge,
So was it 77 you started with Jeff then, Ray, was it?
I started with Jeff about 77, yeah. And then, oh God, again, I'd say I was banned from driving, doing that bit, and it wasn't close towards getting my license back. He'd be doing events and somebody would be driving. I'd be sat in navigating and that to do the servicing and things. And then when he bought the unit, we all went, well, myself to start with, and then Dave Campion came along, who left in 86 and went to work at ProDrive, There was only myself at the time and Dave, And then 1 or 2 people started drifting in when we started getting the work in, with the likes of Louise, with the Fiesta that we did for it. We did Mk2 for Malcolm Patrick, who was my dentist at the time, Jeff wanted a new one, so I built him a new Mk2. Then he wanted another one, and we built him another one. That would be leading up to, I suppose, when Roger drove one of them in Madeira. Jeff drove one in Madeira. Frank Rowlands, who was famed from, obviously, Mike Quicks. Mike, trying to think of a name. One Group 1 back in the day, quick lad, Mike. And Frank navigated for Jeff, and I think John Robinson navigated for Roger.
Mhm.
And then also we had Louise and Ellen out there in the Fiesta, you know.
It sounds like, and from reading about it, that you guys at MCD fairly quickly established like a reputation. Like the work started to seem to come in, and you started attracting people looking for cars to be prepared and ran reasonably
It,
quickly
it,
for a fledgling outfit.
it did, yeah. I mean, we got to know obviously John Taylor quite well, you know. John was talking to people and work was starting to come our way and things, you know. I've always been nosy but quiet, you know, watching what people are doing and sieving through the information and throwing information that I thought was an absolute load of bollocks, and sort of, you know, taking the good stuff, if you like, and storing it, you know. It comes back to my early days at the garage, you know.
I mean, it sounds like you guys got to grips with the Mk2 Escort in sort of the later stages of its works career pretty damn quickly. Certainly, if results are anything to go by, what was it like as a car to work on?
Simple,
Mhm.
absolutely simple. You know, I mean, Jeff had arranged one event, which was Trentham Gardens, which was obviously a single venue event, part tar, part muck, gravel, you know. And then the next day, which was the Sunday, he'd arranged to do Knowsley Safari Park, where he wanted it totally all tarmac. So we finished the event at Knowsley, and I come back in the van, car on the trailer, got the car on the ramp overnight. I'd converted it to full tarmac again, got it all loaded up, and then off to Knowsley Safari Park, you know, snow on the ground. No point in having slick tires when there's snow on the ground, you know. No, and ice, but I mean, they were really good days because we were up against the likes of Tony Worswick, who had a Mk2 with a heart in it, you know, a 2-litre two heart, you know.
Mm-hmm.
And all other quite quick lads from around there, you know.
Speaking of engines, when does Terry Hoyle enter the picture? Because I know you worked with him in the RED days. Was he there at MCD?
He obviously wasn't at MCD because obviously Terry had his own business, you know, down at Malden, you know.
Mm-hmm.
It's difficult to think because I built the engines to start with, because I built 1300 BDAs for Keith Billows back in the day, you know, in the Mark 1. We actually beat Malcolm Wilson in his 1300 Screamer on the Burma rally, you know. Keith was, again, we were in 1300 class, and we beat Malcolm in his Screamer, you know. We had the 1300 BDA. The good thing about that was we had a very rare 5-speed dog jackknife box in the car, which was only the size basically as the old bullet box used to be, you know, and it was a very reliable box. It had drop gears coming out the back of it, which you could change dead easy, you know. And for a 1300, there's no point in having like a 4.7 or a 5.1 in it. You want something like a 5.6 in it, you know. And able to change the ratios, the overall ratio of the box. It was really handy, you know. But we had used Tony Drummond. Tony did 2 or 3 engines for us. I actually stopped up at his house and premises, I think twice overnight to pick up engines ready to fit the next day, you know. It's got to be Probably Dave Wild from Dave Wild Engines down in Malden again. Dave Wild worked or did his apprenticeship with Hart back in the day. And it was David who built the engine in the famous black Vatanen Escort, for Vatanen's program. We had on loan from the factory, which was an ex-Sutton car, DKP.
Mm-hmm.
That was to be used purely as gravel, which would have been Mintex, Welsh, Scottish.
Mm-hmm.
And for tarmac, I built a brand new, which was a 15-inch arch car, all done by Gartrack,
And what a car! I mean, you created one of the best, fastest, and best looking of all Mk2 Escorts there.
Oh, so people say.
I'm sure you're happy to hear it, Ray, as well.
I mean, there's all sorts of trick went on in the factory, and there's tales about the thing was long wheelbase and all this, that, but it wasn't, There were things done by Alan Wilkinson down there, which I suppose you could say was probably the way to do it for tarmac. Everything was lowered in as much as the steering rack originally had two positions, was the standard position and the lowered tarmac position. But it was moved further down again. But the problem was the bottom bolt that went in the cross member, unfortunately, you couldn't use it. So the cross member had to be modified again, and the bottom bolt went in literally upwards from the bottom instead of going in at 45 degrees from the front. And that was when, again, in the early days, there was three types of steering arm. There was the standard black one, the green half tar, half gravel, and the red one, which was the full tarmac one. And that was all developed going back to the Monte cars that they built, Tension strut was used rather than an anti-roll bar. And like today, they seem to use more compression strut today, But to my mind, the testing that we did in Ireland with Ari before the circuit, and John Taylor was with us, it's better under braking because it stops the car from effectively lifting under braking.
Mm-hmm.
Which tension, your compression strut tends to make the vehicle lift a little. If you watch it under tension, it doesn't. It tends to sit and brake better. We spent two days over there. I'm trying to remember now exactly where, because I've been over so many times, up to Muckish Mountain and various places over in your neck of the woods,
And that car wore a different registration on the circuit, didn't it? Because the DKP one was on the.
I mean, I've written so much about it on the glorious days of rallying, or the golden years of rallying, DKP, as I say, was the forest car, literally forest car.
That's the Rothmans liveried Escort. There was you see with DKP often.
It was, yeah,
the white one.
It was painted in the black and white shell colours,
Mm.
The tarmac car was a brand new car, and it had the registration of FEK on it.
Yes,
it had FEK for the circuit, but when it come to the Isle of Man,
DKP
for some
again.
reason, I do not know why, because literally, although I had an awful lot to do with the company, I was a mushroom, really. I was just there to do the job and effectively keep your mouth shut, sort of thing, which sometimes annoyed me because, I did have an awful lot of later years back in the Cosworth days. I had an awful lot of stand-up arguments with the manager that Jeff brought in after Dave Campion left, as to why are you spending all this money on these components? I mean, I just turned around to him and said, well, you know, we're winning events, we're winning championships. What do you want me to do? And I just didn't know I didn't like the attitude sort of thing, you know. I mean, winning championships, you're working your bollocks off effectively. Large amounts of hours. It wasn't a 9-to-5 job, you know. You're racking your brain as to what to do, and you get a car in that you don't know anything about, and you are building a brand new car, effectively throwing away things that are not required, and designing the car so as it can be repaired very quickly, so things aren't getting in the way for hands to get in there to do the work, you know. I mean, that was the thing. One of the comments that Ari gave or said to me when I first opened the bonnet of the black car, the black and white, the tarmac car, he saw it and he said, Raymond, he said, how does it work? What do you mean, how does it work? He said, well, he said, if you look at the Sutton cars, he said, there's pipes and cables going everywhere. I said, well, you don't need all these pipes and cables. You know, if you design the thing properly when you're building it, don't use the factory stuff, you know. I mean, they were using the factory loom, which come round past the exhaust. All the looms that I used, they were made by a chap again called Dave Wilde from Chester, who was an electrician, and he made all our looms. The looms were brought along the top of the wing out of the way, or the inner wing out of the way, you know, out of the heat. So if there was any form of damage, it could be repaired quickly, you know. But going back to the black and white one, the tarmac Escort, as I say, I don't know the reason why the reg was changed back to DKP, whether it was something to do with the factory and they wanted to see that registration on it. I don't know.
You never could have known the amount of subsequent confusion that would have caused, an internet murmuring caused by that.
I must have put on probably 20 on the site, putting people right. That's what I did it last night, telling people, you know, it's not a Sutton car, you know, it's a Sutton reg.
Were you ever surprised by the outsized amount of mystique about that particular car? Because it really is kind of like a bit punches above its weight in terms of its importance and how much people, you know, like it and identify with it in its history. You must feel quite proud now to have been involved with such
I feel very proud about it, you know. I mean, when she was on the Manx, there's a stage that runs south, and it's a bit neutered to start with, and then it's in the middle of the island. It's got about a mile straight, and we were at the end of the stage waiting for him to come through, and I could hear this thing coming through this nutty bit and then onto that mile straight. And it sounded like a Formula 2 car coming down, you know. And it was a 2-litre engine, but it was a very, very special 2-litre engine that Dave built, you know. And when Ari came to the end of the stage, I said, oh, no, all right. Oh, yeah, he said, yeah, fine, no problem. I said, what were you pulling down the straight? And he said, about 10.2, you know, 10,200 RPM, you know. I say it was a special lump. It was what they call a BDT dry deck block, as the water doesn't pass between the head gasket. It goes around the back of the block and put into the back of the head, you know. Originally, it was obviously BDT, which was 1770 or something like that, because it was 2-litre. The cylinder head was a BDT head, which has got the vertical exhaust flange, 4-bolt, or 4 stud, rather than the 3 stud at about 30 degrees, isn't it? Something like that. Done to BDX spec, which is the 10mm spark plug and very big valves in it, you know. Lucas fuel injected. Twin scavenge oil pump on it at the side of the block. And the oil pump, the pressure pump, is in the front cover where the jack shaft is. That was a problem we had on the circuit. We'd done the first loop back into Belfast, outside the Belfast Hall there, you know, the town hall, and got an early morning call, you know, get up, get it sorted. And we had to be down the road, we had to be down the motorway, about 8 or 9 mile, possibly a bit more, for the first service, you know. I got a crackling message on the radio, you got to get back here a bit quick, you know. So got back as quick as we could back to the town hall there, and apparently they'd cracked the engine up, started it, but there was no oil pressure. Oh God, you know. So I had a good look round it and that, because the oil pump that was on it, the oil relief recirculates back into the pickup part of it. And I'm thinking, you know, I wonder if we got a stuck relief valve or something, you know. Oh, what do you do now? So anyway, I got the van in close to the car, because on the vans we had compressed air. We also had generators, which were both on the engine, you know. So I got an air line, and the breather out of the dry sump tank at the back was just underneath the back bumper. So I got the airline out and I shoved the airline up it, and I pressurized the whole system with the engine running. And next minute, Ari said, yeah, pressure's up, okay. Oh, I just pulled the pipe out of the way, shut the boot, and next minute, the car just disappeared at about 10,000 RPM, you know. They weren't late, but Christ, I think he must have gone down the motorway flat in top, you know, probably about 115, 118 mile an hour, you know.
What was it like working with Ari at the time? You know, a newly minted world champion, and you know, one of the.
You know, it was such a privilege, because, you know, you're looking up to people like that who are world champions, but the man is likely to smash your car up, you know. But
He did a couple of times.
I've had that with other people, you know. And I mean, I couldn't afford to rally back in the day, you know, a young family and that, and a home to get going. So I thought, well, if somebody wants to pay me to build the cars, I'll build them to the best spec I could, and you drive them, you know. And well, say we went. The testing that we had in Ireland was most interesting, because I'd used the setting that John Taylor used to use back in the day, or back in, you know, on the tarmac stuff he'd done in Ireland, you know. And I'd set it to that, and Harry took the car out, and he said, it's okay, he said, but what have you got on the rear? So I told him, we've got a certain amount of poundage springs, and there's a 60-pound helper. Oh, okay, he said, right. He said, right. He said, lower the spring platform about 1/4 inch. So did both platforms, and off both of them went down the road, you know. And he come back and he said, okay. He said, take it up 1/4 inch plus 1/8 inch. So I did that. Come back. That'll do, he said. He said, drop it down to where it was and come in the car with me. So dropped it down, got in the car, and we went off down this road. And it was in a valley, and it was quite bumpy, you know. And he said, "Can you see what's happening?" And I said, "The back end's jumping about a bit, isn't it? You know." "Yes," he said. He said, "Take your belt off, turn round, and get hold of the back damper." I took my belt off, heaved myself over between the seats, and I could put my hand on the top of the damper, and I could feel it. He said, "There," I said. He said, "The problem is," he said, "excuse me." He said, "The setting that you had," he said, "it was upsetting the valve in the damper itself, and it's making the hydraulics do funny things." So we took it back, reset it to as he wanted it, took it out again. He said, "Right, go on, let this, put your hand on it again and see what you mean." And I could put my hand on it, and it was just a normal movement. There wasn't as if the damper was kicking back, you know. And that's when he was quite happy with that. I think we altered the toe. I think another 1/16 of an inch toe in, I think it was. And he was quite happy with it. Totally, totally.
Would Ari spend a good deal of time with you on the car, or would he be kind of happy to walk off in the evening and trust what was going on, or would he take a good deal of time to inspect the car before events?
No, we'd just have a good look around it, and I think once he'd driven it, and because he'd obviously driven the DKP, he'd driven that on our forest spec, and he was quite happy with that, and then once we'd done the testing with JT in Ireland, and he was happy with that. There was no fuss with the fella, he just got on with doing the job,
He always struck me as someone who perhaps could almost drive around any setup imperfection if there was one.
Oh, he's a Colin McRae, isn't he? That's where Colin got it from. Does it matter? Drive the bloody thing. If it's still going, whether it's going sideways, even if it's going partly backwards, you've got to get it to the end of the stage. Don't whinge about it. Just do it. I mean, there's many times I've come across drivers that I've worked with, and I've had to shout at them. Just get on with it. Do it. Bring it back. We'll fix it, sort of thing. I had to go at Mark Lovell over things like that. Told him off. Look, Mark, I said, you've got the ability to do it. Just drive it. And he did.
Have you got a top 5 of drivers you've given a bollocking in that respect?
I don't think so. I mean, I've bollocked quite a few of them in the day, but I don't think so. I mean, I gave Roger a bollocking one time in at the deep end,
Mm-hmm.
What was Roger like to work with?
Roger was such a gentleman. He again, he'd get on and he'd drive it. Doesn't matter what it was, if there was a problem, drive around the problem, talk to you, come in, talk to you. He'd just take you to one side and tell you what he thought the problem was, and just left you really to get on and sort it, It's navigators that you have problems with because they're always shouting 2 minutes, 2 minutes,
We're going to take a break there and rejoin for part 2 next week, and we'll finish up our chat with Ray. Thanks for listening, and tune in again next week.
So it was that 1982 saw the world champion return to the British series, in which he'd honed his skills. He was driving the fastest Ford to date, the infamous MCD Black Escort. And joining him was a new co-driver, Terry Harriman.
And that must have been, I suppose, the ultimate Escort. It was just before Escort as a competitive car had become a real obsolete. And it was a car we rallied in '82, and I don't think we ever really won anything, but we were very, very fast in that car.